Hey everyone, and welcome to my channel. I'm Kip Davis. I'm a biblical scholar and a specialist in early Judaism on the Hebrew Bible and stuff like that. Today is Friday. No, it's not. Sorry, I lied. Today is Wednesday. It's Wednesday, guys. Wednesday, the 8th of May. It's just after 6 o'clock p.m. out here on the West Coast. And this is a little late for me to be streaming. Usually I'm eating dinner by this time, but I thought that this was worthwhile to do tonight. I had hoped to even maybe have a couple of guests, and it's still open, so I set the time to try and accommodate as many people as we could. It's good to see a bunch of friends in the audience. It's good to see April here, and Nitty, and Revillo 178. Oxton is here. Nathan BTQ, good to see you. Good to see you, X Music, Supreme Scientist. Jordan, over at Potential Theism. We just did a stream. I guess it was last week, right, Jordan? About the silliness of the godless engineer and his ideas about the crucifixion. My longtime supporter, Lady Wasser, is here. Sam the Bloke. Uh, Great to see everyone. Oh, I missed Vishanti, of course, is here. How dare you toy with my hopes and dreams? Uh, some people have asked if I think somebody quack shot has asked if the Christian Road Warrior is joining, and I certainly hope so. If he shows up, I will post the link, and he can join me on stage. So yeah, but that I mean we'll get to the topic tonight here in a few minutes. But I just today it was a lovely warm spring day out here on the West Coast. The sun is shining. It's dry, which is always nice. It's not always dry out here. Um, so it was just a great spring day. It had me just feeling very much like my springy self. The wife and I are planning to get out for the long weekend next weekend. We're heading up to visit some friends. I've been frantically trying to replace the floor in my camping trailer. I just got that done. So that's pretty awesome. I'm excited about that. The Stanley Cup playoffs are happening right now, guys, and it's the second round. If you're not following along, what are you doing, right? I just watched Colorado come back from a 3-0 deficit in the first period to beat the Dallas Stars in Dallas in overtime in the first game of their series last night. It was pretty awesome, pretty badass. I'm not gonna lie. I think Colorado might be my team this year. I think I've got them heading to the finals. I noticed that Boston and Florida are playing as we speak. Game two. Boston leads that series 1-0, by the way, and it's currently 2-1 for Florida. Just coming on to the end of the second period. The Edmonton Oilers and the Vancouver Canucks are meeting here in about an hour. I think it's in Edmonton. Is it in Edmonton or is it in Vancouver? Tonight's game. I have to check because I don't even. Oh, maybe it's in Vancouver. Yeah, it's in Vancouver. So I know that this is unusual, but desperate times call for desperate measures, guys. So I'm giving you permission just for like the next 10 days, maybe 2 weeks. it's okay to cheer for the Vancouver Canucks. Quackshot makes a good point. It's in Vancouver, but they've got no chance without Demko. That could be, but listen, it's the Edmonton Oilers, and everything about the Edmonton Oilers just sucks. So just for this round, it's okay to cheer for the Vancouver Canucks. Ordinarily, we wouldn't do this. But what are you gonna do, right? Anyone but Edmonton. That's my motto, and it will be my motto until the day I die. I've got myself a cold brew here, so I'm ready to go. How are you guys doing? Terje Nilsson I love Vancouver too. Vancouver is a fabulous city. It's the hockey team that I tend not to be able to stomach. Um, and I think it has something to do with the fact that I grew up in Calgary, and I've been living out here in the Lower Mainland area, just outside of Vancouver, probably for the last oh God, how long has it been now? I think almost 25 years. I've lived out this way. I've probably lived out here just as long, or almost as long as I lived in Calgary. Jesse Reinbach, if Vancouver wins, they will destroy the. Yes, that's true, which is why we don't want them to win it all, because it's a lovely city, and it's bad when people destroy things. So yeah, touche. Mm. Oh, I think I saw. I should. Yeah, thank you, Ronan of Stag, for the $5 Canadian super sticker. Really appreciate it. Thanks for coming out. So what's going on tonight? I watched a stream over the weekend, and I just caught it right at the tail end with like an OG of Christian YouTube apologetics. The Christian Road Warrior has been doing this since 2007. So seriously, mad respect for that dude. That's amazing. He's still going. Um, he says a lot of silly things, but that's Christian apologists. This is what they do. They tend to say silly things. So Christian Road Warrior was responding to a video that I'm just gonna take it. I really appreciate Ronan of Stag, but I'm taking the super sticker down for now. So he took some considerable umbrage with a video that Derek over at MythVision published relatively recently, titled "Betrayed by Yahweh: The Shocking Lies Concealed in Genesis." It's not. Let's admit it. Like, this is a clickbaity title, but this is kind of what Derek does. It's cool. That's his jam. He can do that. That's fine. So this is a segment from a series of interviews that I did with my very good friend, Dr. Joshua Bowen, when he was filming. He's got a couple of courses coming out with MVP courses, and I believe those are coming out, or at least the first one is coming out, like imminently, like any day now. Derek's going to be ready to drop that new course with Dr. Josh. I think he's got a course on slavery. He's also got a course on mythology in the Hebrew Bible and in the ancient Near East. So be sure to check those out. I'm not sure if they're both dropping at the same time, or if he's dropping one first and there's more to follow. But that's he was down there filming for those, and I went down to hang out with them for a couple of days, and we did some candid interviews together. And one of the things Derek wanted us to talk about was this amazing story. It's one of my favorite stories in the entire Bible. Is the story of the Adam and his woman called Chava, or Eve, that appears in Genesis chapter 2 and 3. This is the second creation story in Genesis. There are two creation stories in Genesis. The first appears in Genesis 1, and the second appears in Genesis 2 and 3. Genesis 2 and 3, this creation story was probably actually written first. And the Genesis 1 creation story, there's good reason to think that it was written in response to this. Oh, wrong one. Sorry. You better believe it, Sam the bloke. Hype. The hype is coming. Josh has a course. He's got a couple that are coming. You guys really need to check those out. So, where was I? Yeah, so Derek wanted us to talk about Genesis chapter 2 and 3, the second creation story. And specifically, he wanted to talk about what happens in chapter 2, verses 16 to 17, where Yahweh tells Adam first. This is a story people, I believe, are mostly familiar with. We'll spend some time actually going into the text and looking more closely at the story itself. But in this story, God creates the man, the Adam. He takes him and he sets him in the garden with the purpose to work the land, basically till the land and to keep it. This is God's garden. This is an urban masterpiece that he has built for himself. There might be some cultic connotations behind this. It's a fascinating story, just at the outset. But God, it says that God made all the trees, and he planted all the trees in the Garden of Eden. And then it says that the tree of the knowledge of good and evil was in the middle of the garden, and the tree of life was there also. And then when God puts the Adam in the garden, he gives him this one instruction. He says to him, you can eat from any tree that you want that's in the garden, except do not eat from the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, for on the day that you eat from it, you are definitely going to die. That's what the text says. And of course, if you know this story, and we'll get into it a little bit, Adam and his woman, that he later calls Chava or Eve, they eat from the fruit of the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, and they don't die. It actually says their eyes are opened and they see that they're naked. We'll get into the story, but this is the question that Derek posed at the start of his interview with us. I encourage you to check it out. It was a fun chat. I think it was pretty interesting. I think you guys will enjoy it. But Derek poses these questions. Did God lie in the Garden of Eden? Is there other evidence that can help us answer that question? And does God have a track record for doing this kind of stuff in the literature? So this is, we took 10, 15, was it 20 minutes? It might have been 20 minutes to sit down and answer the question. I see we got some stragglers. It's good to see some of my friends here, like Hank Fishy. Good evening. And Star Song is here. And my friend Maya Atkinson. Why are the trees there? Because trees are nice. They're pleasant. We like trees. Are you asking specifically about the tree of knowledge of good and evil and the tree of life? If this was a true story, if this was an historical story, that's a very good question. Why are these particular trees there? Because this is mythology, they're absolutely pregnant with significance and meaning, and we can get into a little bit of that. If this is a topic that you're interested in, I'm going to be doing a talk on some of these issues over at Deep Drinks podcast at the end of the month on May 27th. I'm heading back there to talk about this story in Genesis chapter 2 and 3, and we'll get into some of the comparative ancient Near Eastern tropes there. But so, anyways, this is what's going on in Derek's video, and the Christian Road Warrior took great umbrage with this video. And he decided to do it's only about an hour. He did a live stream response to this video, and basically through it he says he wanted to show who is really lying. I think the implication was that Josh and I were actually lying about what's in the text, and that God doesn't lie at all. I think that's sort of what what the implication is. So I kind of want this to be fairly interactive tonight. I'm pleased you guys are here. I'm going to try and pay attention to the chat. So if you have questions, please feel free to fire those off. Let's watch the Christian Road Warrior. I hope if he finds some time and is able to come out, I hope he lets me know. And seriously, like come on in. Let's get you on the stage and let's talk about some of this stuff. Yeah, let's I think we should just get right into this, and we'll talk about some of the stuff that's going on in the text, some of the stuff that the Christian Road Warrior is presenting in his video, and let's see this. So as I do, what I like to do with all of the videos that I review on my channel, just to let everyone know, full disclosure, this is I curate them. I pull clips out of them, which I think are most relevant. Most of it is just editing to keep things condensed and clear. But there are a couple of sections in this video that I've pulled just entirely. I'll let you know when those come up, and I'll explain too why I pulled them. But let's just start. Let's take a look at what the Christian Road Warrior has to say here. Let me know
here's the thing,
if you can hear it,
and this
or
is
if
one
you
of the
can't.
things I don't like.
Hope everyone can hear it. Thumbs
what
up.
these guys
Can you hear
will
it?
do from time to time is the other side of the argument. They'll poo-poo it, or they'll kind of straw man it. They don't really give the other side's argument very well. And another criticism that I have to make is that they will invariably not read the actual text. They'll, I guess, go off memory, and a lot of times their memories are not very good. And I'm going to show you that in a minute. So that's a part of the problem. Doing sort of a straw man representation of the actual argument from the text, and not really representing the text accurately. They're going, like, I guess, from memory. They're not.
So I just right from the start. Now he criticizes us for not reading the text, not clearly representing the text, and making mistakes about the text. And to be fair, he points one out. Like, I made a clear error in my recollection of the text because we didn't have it in front of us in our review, right, of the passage. We were riffing on a little bit, pulling it from memory. But when we get to the mistake I made, I would argue that it's somewhat inconsequential. It's an interesting point, but it was a little bit besides the point of the question that Derek asked, which was, what's going on in this story with God? Is he lying, or is there an explanation for this? Hey, I just want to recognize Sam the bloke. Yeah, man, has joined and become a member of my channel. Welcome. I had channel memberships, guys. Everyone can do this. You can all become members of the channel, and you can post cool emojis. I've got cool emojis. Let me show you some of my cool emojis. There's some. Look at those. And here's some more. This one, the mud kip, was courtesy of April Van Ryn. And you guys should recognize this one as well. Yeah, so that's my apology. I made that one for my appearances on his channel, and he has graciously given me permission to use it for my channel memberships. So emojis, guys, emojis. Yeah. So I now I gotta say, I think this can be uh, a fair criticism. This is a criticism that I have made of others when they paraphrase text, when they don't actually dig in and read the actual text itself. Good to see you here, B.S. Lewis. Also, want to give a shout out to Hard Work. Good to see you, and Flum 666. So this, yeah, fair enough. This is a complaint I have had myself about when apologists or when other critics attempt to critique the Bible. Oftentimes they'll do so from a paraphrase or from memory, and they'll make mistakes, and these mistakes can affect the way that you're arguing. Good to see Lawrence here. Tomer says it's too late for him to join us tonight. But you know, he's just a baby, so whatever, Tomer. I'm sure you'll watch this later. And oh yeah, Jennifer Sills is here. Nice to see you. So, anyways, it can be a fair criticism. Now, I'm going to leave it up to you as we get into this video to make this determination. Let me know if you think this is a fair criticism of me in the mistake that I made about the text. It's good to see that Lawrence is going to pick up the slack for annoyance. It's much needed, clearly. And thank you, Hard Work, for the $2 super chat. Thanks for educating us. It's my pleasure. It's what I do. It's what I love. Member Stephanie is here. You didn't get a notification. Stupid YouTube. The algorithm. The algorithm is our god, and we are subject to its service whether we like it or not. And you know, that sucks. I'm sorry, Stephanie, that you did not get a notification. So let's, yeah, like I said, I'll leave it up to you to decide whether you think this is a fair criticism. Let's continue watching some of this video.
Not reading the text. 'Cause right now, Mr. Durag Davis on his head here is not accurately representing the text. Okay, I'm going to show you the text, and I will put the text on the screen because
So something maybe you should know about the Christian Road Warrior, if you're not familiar with him, is he's a little bit like Donald Trump in this respect, where he invents these funny nicknames for people that he's critiquing and that he's responding to. He's called me Kip the Slip before. He calls Josh Joshua Bowflex Bowen, or in this video he comes up with a new one. He's pretty happy with himself for coming up with Joshua Rainbow Bowtie Bowen. And now he's developed a new one for me too, Durag Davis, because I wear bandanas and toques on my head. And honestly, that's just because I hate cutting my hair. And I also hate having my hair in my eyes. So it's just the most comfortable, easiest way for me to keep it back. But whatever. It's neither here nor there, as
Satan
he
didn't
says.
mention anything about touching. That came from
Yeah.
Eve, and we're going to get into the little detail about what that is. All right, uh, because that's not what the snake said, though the serpent said. That's not what happened. But again, Kip,
So just so you know, because I didn't actually include my error in here. I cut that out. But the mistake that I made when I was paraphrasing the text was that in my description of what the serpent, what the snake, the Nachash, said to Eve, I said that he asked if the people were allowed to eat from the fruit of any tree in the garden or even touch it. That's a mistake. He asks the question if they're allowed to eat from any tree in the garden. She says we can eat from all the trees, except for the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, and we're not even allowed to touch it. We'll talk a little bit about that when we get there, but that was the error, the egregious error that I made with regards to this passage.
is not accurate in
Hmm.
representing the text of
It's true.
Scripture. The scholars that I appeal to, like Dr. Gleason Archer here in this book here, the man knows more languages than Kip and what's Bowen combined. Okay, he's done here.
And that's probably true. I have no doubt about that. Gleason Archer was a brilliant scholar. And he was also a very ardent evangelical Christian. And I have the same criticisms of him as I do of a number of scholars who I feel allow their conclusions to inform their scholarship far too often. So this happens, right? And none of us are perfect, and we're all liable to making these sorts of mistakes. I'm sure I make similar mistakes in my own scholarship where I'm excited about an idea or a conclusion, and it's going to affect the way that I affect the ways in which I evaluate and weigh the evidence towards those conclusions. And it's one of the things that's really, really important for scholars to do on a regular basis is to check ourselves, to check how we're evaluating the evidence, to check and see where our own biases are, and to be like forthright about those. So, I try, but again, I'm not perfect. I'm gonna make mistakes.
His homework, and even before that,
Hey, should I
long time before that,
speed it up a little
we
bit?
got
Maybe I'll
this
speed it up
guy
a bit.
talking about these alleged discrepancies and whatnot. So this is not new stuff. This is old stuff, basically. I think it's important to get to the scripture. So basically, what's being said here is, did
So,
God lie?
and he's absolutely right about that too. Um, the objections to critical scholarship, insofar as Genesis chapter 2 and 3 are concerned, are not particularly new. It's old stuff that continues to get recycled over and over again. I'm sure, I didn't look it up, but that book on Bible difficulties that Gleason Archer published, I suspect he probably published that back in the 1970s or the 1980s. He showed another book, the Haley Handbook to the Bible, or a book by Arthur Haley. This scholar was active in the 30s, 40s, and 50s. He's right. Like, this stuff it's old stuff. The sad thing is that it often feels like the serious objections by scholars tend not to be taken very seriously by apologists. And I guess, you judge. Um, oh, hey, let's do it that way. I like that way better, guys. So we're doing it that way. Yeah. But we judge the claims, right? We look at the evidence and we judge the claims, and if there is bias, if there is something that's affecting the work and the outcome, I think it's important that we point this out. Scott Rutherford, at least I am. At least you are wearing. I'm not wearing a Leafs cap though. Oh, uh, sorry. There we go. At least you're not wearing a Leafs cap. Yeah, that would uh yeah, that would not be any good, would it? So, good to see you, James Apperson. Nice to see you here. Oh, hey, and Michael Beverly is here. Good to see you, Michael. All right. So, let's continue with this video.
Did he lie? That's the wrong question to ask. I think the right question to ask would be, what did God mean when he said what he said, right? You can't really determine.
I think that is a very good question to pose of the text. And he's going to get to the text, and we'll go through it with him when the Christian Road Warrior gets to the text. It's a very good question. I would say that another question that we should ask as we're approaching the text is, what are Yahweh's, it's Yahweh specifically here, what are Yahweh's motivations for giving the instruction to the man that he does with regard to the knowledge, the tree of the fruit of the knowledge of good and evil? And what are his motivations for keeping him from eating from it in the first place, right? Motivation is an important part here. And while I think it's relatively clear what God's motives are, and I'll point those out. And it's something that we see within the text that the Christian Road Warrior does not actually get to, but we're going to cover it. All right.
Determine if someone's lying if you first can't even determine what they're saying and what they're meaning by what they said. Let's look at the text now. Most of the time, these guys don't actually engage the text. All right. So what you have,
well, I'm certainly going to this evening,
before you is a small version of Genesis 2. So this is Genesis 2. And the Lord God commanded the man, saying, of every tree of the garden you may freely eat. So they were given a lot of freedom, except for one. But of the tree of the knowledge of good and evil you shall not eat. For in the day that you eat of it, you shall surely die. And I think what's interesting, and this is what they're talking about here. We're talking about the first man and woman, right? When God tells them you'll surely die, it would be difficult. At least I'm thinking it would have been difficult for them to even understand what it means to die, right? Because they're the first two, and apparently they haven't seen death. So you wonder, did they even understand what that word meant, that you're going to die? That's kind of neither here nor there. The question,
I just to know what you guys think. Is this something that that is worth considering? Does the first couple understand enough of reality to even know what death is? So that's not a question that is readily answered by the text, but I think and I think we'll see as we go on here that there are certain presumptions that are made with regards to the text that are not native to the text. And I would say, the Christian Road Warrior provided me some general criticisms of my approach to the literature. Well, here's maybe my one of my I have a couple, but let's start with this one. My objection, one of my principal objections to his handling of the biblical text, is that he makes some pretty well-worn presumptions about the text. He presumes conclusions about the text that have been drawn out over the course of thousands of years of reading the text by Christians, by Western Christians, And I would actually suggest, and one of the things that I think is so fun and so interesting about biblical scholarship is that when you dig down and when you recognize where these texts came from, the culture and the language and the circumstances surrounding their construction and their writing, they are actually really, really quite different from how we have come to understand them over the course of the last number of centuries or millennia. And that's pretty interesting and it's pretty wild. And we'll point out a couple of those features in the text as we go. Maybe I should say this now. This is something I almost never do, but this is a YouTube thing to do. If you haven't already liked the video, you should do that. Feed the algorithm, people. It is your master. It is your god. Make sure that you pay homage to the algorithm. But yeah, let's continue with the video here.
Becomes when we get to Genesis 3, because here I want you to pay attention once again to what was said by God. He said, "You shall not eat, for in the day that you eat of it, you shall surely die." Right? And in the Hebrew, the verb to die is used twice. It's just a way of emphasizing, right? But the key element I want you to pay attention to is what God actually said in Genesis 2:17, that you shall not eat of that tree. He did not say anything about touching, because it should be obvious you can touch something without eating it, right? So the issue was eating. So this is what I want you to pay attention to the most. This chapter is talking about their sin. All right, so now the serpent was more cunning than any beast of the field which the Lord God had made. And he said to the woman, "Has God indeed said, you should not eat of every tree of the garden?" Kip the Slip talked about touching. God didn't say anything about touching. The serpent didn't say anything about touching. Genesis 3:2. And the woman said to the serpent, "We may eat the fruit of the trees of the garden." Verse 3. But of the fruit of the tree which is in the midst of the garden, God has said, "You shall not eat it, nor shall you touch it, lest you die." Remember back in 2:17, God said nothing about touching it. So what is going on here? Eve added. See, this is one of the reasons why there's so many, I believe.
I'm gonna pause there for a second. I think this is actually a very good question. And it's one that we'll get into here a little bit. But maybe first, before we do that, he's introduced the text in question. I think it'll be useful if maybe all of us just read the story let's work through the story from Genesis 2:17 through chapter 3, and I will point out a couple of things for you guys to keep in mind here as well as we go. So I'm pulling up the text from an excellent resource. If you are not already familiar with it, you should be. So Sepharia.com is a repository of Jewish literature, tons of Hebrew texts, including the Tanakh, the Mishnah, both the Jerusalem and the Babylonian Talmud, numbers of the Midrashim, all sorts of good stuff. Commentaries by Rashi, and probably some others as well. I haven't dug in quite that deeply. And there's English translations for a lot of this stuff too. So what we have here on the screen is Genesis chapter 2, and this starts right after the geographical description of the garden that's located in Eden in the east. And here's what the text says. So it says that Yahweh God took the Adam and he set him in the garden in Eden to work and to keep, or to till and to tend it. I noticed somebody had asked that I please take note and provide clarity in this stream that that this word here, la'avda, to work, is the verbal form of the word from which we also get the word eved, which is the noun that means slave. There's slavery in the garden at creation. The feature of humanity, the reason why the man was made, was to work the garden as an oblate, basically, or as a slave, to keep it and to look after it for Yahweh. It's Yahweh's garden, and this is his purpose from the beginning. So, what do we read? And Yahweh God commanded the Adam, the man, saying, from every tree of the garden you assuredly can eat. Okay? Moving on to verse 17. But from the tree of knowledge of good and evil, or good and bad, you are not to eat from that one. For on the day you eat from it, the expression here is literally mot tamut, dying, you will die. This is a Hebrew expression. This is the way that we express in Hebrew, in biblical Hebrew, certainty. It's for emphasis. The point is, this is definitely going to happen on the day that you eat from the fruit of the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. So I'm not going to read this part. This is where Yahweh decides that it's not good for the man to be alone, so he resolves to make a helper or a counterpart for him. He settles eventually on taking the side or the rib of the man and fashioning it, literally building it into the woman. And he brings the woman to the man, and the man then says, this one at last is bone of my bone and flesh of my flesh. This one will be called Isha, or woman, because me ish, from ish, this one has been taken. And then this is the explanation of the significance of this. It says, because of this, a man leaves his father and his mother, and he cleaves or clings to his woman, and they become one flesh. Now, this is a very important verse here, right at the end of chapter 2, verse 25. This is what it says. The two of them were arumim, the man and his woman, and they were not ashamed. The two of them, the word arumim is generally translated as naked. The two of them were naked, they were unclothed, and they were not ashamed. Now, remember that when this story was first written, there were no chapters and verse breaks. And I feel like this is an artificial one. It breaks the connection between verse 25 of chapter 2 and verse 1 of chapter 3. That's really, really important, because the man and the woman were naked and they were not ashamed. And then we read right away, now the Nachash, or the servant, was Arum Mecho Chayit Hasadeh Asher Asa Adonai Elohim. The Nachash was Arum. He was more naked than all the animals of the field whom Yahweh God had created. It's exactly the same word. But this same word can also be translated as clever, or smart, or wise, or cunning. Now, I certainly hope you guys see there's absolutely no way this is an accident. This is very intentional. There is a an intentional play on words here in this story that we really need to pay close attention to. The man and the woman were naked, they were arum, and they were not ashamed. The snake was arum. He was more clever than all the animals of the field. And I don't think it's any accident either that the snake is described as arum. This animal is described as clever and more naked, uh, as being the only animal who also sheds his own skin. In antiquity, in the ancient Near East, particularly in the Syro-Palestinian region during the late Bronze Age and the early Iron Age, we know that snakes were like magical symbols. There were divine symbols that were used. You see expressions of this within the Bible. There's a famous story in the book of Numbers of Moses needing to fashion a bronze nachash, literally a bronze serpent, in order for the people to be rescued from these poisonous snake bites. So very important transition here, focusing in on what the relationship between the snake and his arum and the couple and their arumim. So he was the most clever of all the animals that Yahweh God had made. And the snake, he said to the woman, did God really say that you are not to eat from any tree of the garden? The woman responded to the Nachash, to the snake, from the trees of the garden we are able to eat. From all the trees, basically. But from the fruit of the tree, which is in the middle of the garden, God has said, do not eat from it and do not touch it, lest you will die. So let's see. Is that a good place to pause and to talk about the importance of touching in this context? So I think maybe I'm going to let the video play on here for a few minutes, and then we'll get to our next point. But I hope everyone can see already what's happening, the tension that's being built within this story. I think the significance on the play on of nakedness and knowledge is really important in this story. It's something we need to keep in mind as we are reading further. All right, how's everyone doing? Are we having fun? We having a good time? Maybe I'll read a couple of super chats here. In the meantime, Michael Beverly, thank you very much for the 100 Mexican pesos. When in history does the snake become Satan? Is there any Jewish scholarship that agrees with this Christian fabrication on the snake-Satan relationship? So this is actually an idea that looks like it's starting to germinate a little bit in Second Temple Jewish thinking, Jewish ideology. This so importantly, what Michael Beverly is getting at for everyone watching who's unfamiliar. Importantly, the snake is not Satan, right? At least not at the point when this text was written. Certainly, by the time the Apostle Paul is writing, he makes this connection between the snake and Satan. He makes mention there's an allusion to this story, I believe, in First Corinthians. The book of Revelation makes the same allusion to the serpent. I have to go back and look because it's a text I'm not really familiar with, but there is a famous early Jewish piece of literature called The Life of Adam and Eve, in which I believe there's sort of some toying with this idea, with this connection, but it's certainly not a universal connection being made, and it's certainly not a clear one either, at least not this early. But thank you very much for the question. Lawrence from Milwaukee Atheist, thank you very much for the $5 super chat. So there is the tree of life and the tree of knowledge of good and evil. Eating from the second tree will cause them to die. And there's another one here. But if that tree brought death, into the world, does that assume they were immortal before that? Even though the tree of life was guarded from them after very important questions. And Lawrence is picking up what I'm putting down here. This is very important, people. The presumption is often made that that the human pair living in the garden were immortal from the start. And this is something, again, that is not native to the text. It's not native to the story. This is something that gets imported into it later. Later readers are making these presumptions about the text. What I'm doing is I want to look at this story and see what this story is about, independent of whatever else has been written of it. And one of the things that we do discover when we look carefully at this story is it certainly seems like the human couple were not immortal. It seems like it requires eating from the tree of life in order to make someone immortal, and there's no indication that something that has happened at any point in the story. There's some suggestion. I know some scholars, when looking at the story in Genesis 2 and 3, have suggested that there might be some sort of textual corruption in the story at some point, or that maybe in an earlier form of the story, both the tree of life and the tree of the knowledge of good and evil were verboten. That the original command was that you're not to eat from both of them. I've seen that suggested. I don't know how I feel about that, but something that I think is important, and I also want you all to pay attention to, is that the tree of life and the tree of knowledge of good and evil are always, like, they're intertwined, they're together. This is a pair. This is a group. One of the things that I also want to introduce here is, I'm not certain, based on the way God responds to the couple and, to the crisis of them having eaten from the tree of the knowledge of the fruit of good and evil. In the way that he responds to the crisis, I think it's fair to ask the question, does the human couple even know that the tree of life is there? Or maybe a better way to put it, do they even understand, prior to eating from the tree of knowledge of good and evil, do they even understand the implications of eating from the tree of life, what the tree of life does to you? I don't know the answers to those questions, but I think they're important ones. All right, so what we're going to do now is we are going to go back to the Christian Road Warrior, and we're going to watch a little bit more of his stream here, and we will talk a little bit more about the text. All right, I can push. I promise.
So many prohibitions about adding to or taking away from the Word of God, because it can get you into trouble, right? Eve added to God's word. Remember, 2:17, God said not to eat. Didn't say nothing about touching. Serpent even said, eat. Eve says, eat nor touch. Oops. Sorry, Eve, you just did something you weren't supposed to do. You added to what God said. God didn't say anything about not touching. He said, don't eat. Period. Eve added to God's word. Now, and I argue, and I think there are some commentators that argue the same thing. Now, notice what the serpent said. Then the serpent said to the woman, you shall not surely die.
I think I need to pause it there for a moment. I think you guys have noticed this here too, right? So the Christian World Warrior wants to interpret this statement of Eve's as the big problem. The real issue here is that she's adding to God's word. So they let me just, we're going to get to this. Blessed be he. They disobeyed. Disobedience deserves punishment. I would say not always, certainly. There are certainly valid times to disobey instructions. But that's something we could talk about. Uh, so um, the Christian Road Warrior wants to make this connection between uh, Eve's statement that we're not even allowed to touch this tree of knowledge of good and evil in the middle of the garden as a problem. He's suggesting she is adding to God's word, and this is the problem. Is this an idea that you can extract from this text? Now, the other criticism that I have with regards to the way that the Christian Road Warrior approaches the text is that he assumes, and this is something that Christian apologists will do a lot, is there is an assumption of univocality that's set upon the text, that you can basically look at any text in the entire Bible and provide interpretation for it from another part of the Bible, because there's this presumption that it all came from the same place, that all from the same author. And this is something with which I fundamentally disagree. As a scholar of the Bible, my experience and my training indicates without a shadow of a doubt that this is not a univocal text. It is a pluralistic text. It's comprised of all sorts of different types of literature from all sorts of different types of authors addressing all sorts of different types of situations. Some of it is in response to other things that have been written in the past. And as a scholar of the Bible, I take great care to pay attention to those parts. But you can't do that with every single text. In this instance, there's nothing at all within Genesis chapter 2, 2 and 3 that indicates Eve's statement about not touching the fruit is a problem. And the Christian Road Warrior wants to make this an issue. So what is this? What is going on here? Why does she introduce this new information? This is one of these things that scholars are guessing at, right? We don't really know. I think it's one of the things that makes the text really interesting. Some have suggested that she's basically providing extra prohibition to herself as a means of ensuring that she doesn't even accidentally transgress God's rule. I don't think that's. I mean, it's a clever explanation. I don't think that's it, though. I don't think that's the problem here in this text. What I am more inclined to think is that so one of the aspects of this story that's significant and that is also significantly missed and overlooked when people read it, especially in English, and when they don't understand the ancient Near Eastern cultural background of this story, is that the story itself is very closely connected to sex. There's a lot of sexual innuendo built right into the story itself. The verbiage in the story is revealing about the relationship of the images within the story to sex. The verb to know is yada, from which da'at, the word knowledge, comes from, is used by the author of this story with great frequency for sexual intercourse. It happens between the Adam and Eve in chapter 4. It says Adam knew his wife. He had sexual intercourse with her, and she became pregnant, and she gave birth to Cain. Eating in the Bible is often euphemistic of sex. Proverbs chapter 30 verse 20 is a passage. I'm not gonna quote it. You guys can look it up. There's other words here. The woman she comes to discover about the fruit that it's pleasing to the eye, it's desirable. These particular words are sometimes used to describe lusts of the flesh. We see that in Proverbs 6 verse 25, in 21 verse 26, in Song of Songs 2 verse 3. So right away there's already um there's this expectation right from the start when we look at this story that there's something inherent within it to do with sex. And I think that's maybe where this response by the woman, that we're not even allowed to touch it, we can't eat from it, and we can't touch it. I think this is feeding into this sexual innuendo. The word naga in Hebrew, which means to touch, also can appear to indicate sex. There are a couple of examples of this in Genesis chapter 20, verse 6. Maybe I'll just pull a couple of these up. I won't put them on the screen. I'll just pull them up and I'll read them to you. Genesis 20, whoops, 20, what did I say? Genesis 20, verse 6. So this is the story. This is one of these stories of Abraham having to lie to a king about Sarah in order to protect his own life. So he has to lie to Pharaoh to protect his own life, because he's worried that Pharaoh is going to see how beautiful Sarah is, how pleasing to the eyes she is, and he's going to take her and kill Abraham. So he lies and says, well, she's my sister. So Pharaoh takes her anyways. And God actually appears to Pharaoh in a dream and tells him, don't you dare touch this woman, because she belongs to another man. And in verse 6, it says this: God said to him in the dream, I know that you did this with a blameless heart, and so I kept you from sinning against me. That is why I did not let you naga. I did not let you touch her. In this context, this has to do with sex, right? I'm going to read another one. Ruth chapter 2, verse 9 is actually pretty explicit in this regard. Ruth 2 verse 9. So Ruth and her mother-in-law Naomi have returned to the land, and they're under the basic protection of Naomi's kinsman Boaz, and he gives this instruction to the people, his workers on his farm, because he wants to make sure that they're able to glean and to have enough to eat by going to the corners of the field and collecting stuff that's left over. And this is what he says to his workers: keep your eyes on the field they are reaping and follow them. I have ordered the men not to naga, not to touch you. And when you are thirsty, go to the jars and drink some of the water that the men have drawn. So here, the word naga, the promise that no one's going to touch these women, has to do with sex. And importantly, a couple things I'm going to point out to this. In addition, the men who are working for Boaz are specified as na'ar. This is a word that's commonly translated as like little boys, but in various contexts it can mean various different things. I think the basic meaning of it, my understanding of this word's basic meaning, is that a na'ar is any male who has not yet coupled with a woman in any respect, through what we would call marriage, although it's not, it looks nothing like how we would understand marriage. So this makes sense in this context. These na'ar are not allowed to touch or to have sex with the women, with Naomi and with Ruth, even though it would be within their prerogative to do so as unattached men. All right. Let's look at one more. I have one more here. let's see. Proverbs 6:28-29. Proverbs 6:28. Can a man walk on live coals without scorching his feet? It is the same with one who sleeps with his fellow's wife. None who touches her will go unpunished. Here, the word clearly means having sexual intercourse with the woman. I think this kind of stuff is obvious. I very much appreciate the super chats that are coming in. I'm going to look at a couple of these, and maybe we'll keep looking at them as we go through as time allows. Hangfishy for $10. Thank you so much. Dr. Richard Elliott Friedman seems to make sure to call it the fruit of the tree of the knowledge of good and bad and not evil. Is that a hair split, or is there something deeper there? No, there's nothing deeper there. It's a really general word that has very broad applications. When I did my translation of this story for the book that I'm currently working on, that I'm hoping to finish here in the next few months, this is how I translated it, as the tree of the knowledge of good and bad and not evil. I think there's a lot of freight that comes with a word like evil that we probably should not attach to this particular text. It's an excellent question, Hank Vishy. Thank you for that. Jennifer Silvas for $2. Thank you very much. Isn't it good? Oh no. You're gonna have to provide some clarification to me, because I'm afraid I don't understand the question. If you could maybe just expand on that in the chat a little bit. I hope you're still here. Michael Beverly, again, thank you for the 50 Mexican pesos. Can you explain JEDP, if that's right, classifications, the main idea behind this, and how it might affect this text? It's a huge question, and if I'll give you a very brief explanation of how it plays into this particular text. I can talk about it a little bit more at length when we finish the video, if there's time. I don't want to get weighed down too much, but I also want to honor this question. So basically, the idea is scholars, through a variety of and I have videos on this. I recommend, if you haven't watched it already, go check out my series that I made a couple of years ago, responding to a video that Michael Jones did about Genesis chapter 1 to 11. The three of the videos in there are specifically deal with the documentary hypothesis, what it is, where it came from, the evidence for it, and why scholars take it seriously, and why objections to it are generally quite silly. So the scholars have for many years noticed that the Torah, the first 5 books of Moses, are comprised of other sources. And there are patterns that are visible through the sources in terms of the kind of language they use, in terms of their theology, in terms of their depictions and their worldview, and the ways in which they present certain characters. And they early on they developed this idea that there was actually 4 sources behind the Torah, the first 5 books of Moses. The most clearly, readily recognizable of these are D, or the book of Deuteronomy, which is a source all unto itself, distinct from everything else, and P, or the priestly writing, which you see principally in the book of Leviticus, but it's also interwoven quite extensively throughout the narrative portions of Genesis through Numbers. So, and then there's 2 other sources that were identified as J, or the Yahweh source, based on the revelation of God's name as Yahweh very early on, or the Elohist source, or E, which is based on the revelation of Yahweh's name much later, occurring in Exodus 3, as opposed to Genesis chapter 4. And these are generally distinguished by the usage of the name for God, either as Elohim or as Yahweh, but it's a little bit more complicated than that. So basically, this is sort of in broad outlines what this picture looks like. Scholars tend to think, or used to think, that these were composed starting in the Iron Age, maybe as early as 900 BCE, with J being the earliest, then following with E. The suggestion has been that P, or the priestly document, wasn't even composed until like the Babylonian exile, and the Book of Deuteronomy was composed at some point during the reign of Josiah, in and around the 620s BCE. So the reason this is significant to this particular story is because Genesis 2 and 3 is regarded by most, I believe, all scholars as part of so-called J, the Yahweh source, and it's distinct from Genesis chapter 1, which is the priestly creation account, or the P creation account, which is actually written in response, in many respects, to stuff that's going on in the J creation story. So it's this is just a very basic sketch, but I think it's important. The real thing to pay close attention to here is that Genesis chapter 1 and Genesis chapter 2 and 3 were written by different people, and they're addressing different situations with regards to their understanding of the origins in creation. Thank you very much for the super chat, Michael. I hope that helps. How do you think Eve knows about the prohibition? It's a good question. We assume God told her directly, or her husband, the man, the Adam, told her. We don't know. It's not something that the text dwells on, and when the text doesn't dwell on it, or provide any clues within the narrative that this is a significant detail, then I tend to think, if it wasn't so significant for the author, then it's probably not a question that we have a ready answer to. Maybe it's just not important to this story, but maybe this is also where she got the idea that she's not supposed to touch it. I don't know, but thank you very much for the question. All right, so let's continue with the video, and then we'll talk a little bit more about some stuff going on.
Now, a lot of people will say, well, the serpent is lying. I say he's being very sneaky and deceptive. Why? Because he's not saying you should not surely die in response to everything she said. I argue that he's focusing on this little portion that she added. Nor shall you touch it lest you die. God didn't say anything about touching lest you die. But he didn't stop there. He went on. He said, you shall not surely die. And then he added more. For God knows that in the day you eat of it, your eyes will be opened. Now, obviously, this doesn't mean their literal physical eyes will be opened, and you will be like God. Apparently, they didn't realize they were already like God, made in the image and likeness of God. And then he adds, knowing good and evil. So when the woman saw, right, she can see that the tree was good for food and that it was pleasant to the eyes. Again, she can see. So the opening of the eyes isn't talking about physical eyes. And a tree desirable to make one wise, she took of its fruit and ate. Disobedience. She also gave to her husband with her, and he ate. So now what's interesting here is Adam and Eve were both there, and apparently Adam was silent while the two of his wife and the snake were talking, and that's very bad.
I gotta pause it there. There's a couple of things that we need to look at here, guys. First of all, he's made a few claims that that we need to address, and I'm just going to open this up to the chat, people. The Christian Road Warrior has made the claim here that the Adam and his woman Chava, or Eve, did not realize that they were already like God, made in the image and likeness of God. Is this true? Is this something that is native to this story in Genesis chapter 2 and 3? Come on, let me know. What do you think of this? Is this accurate? Is this is this what the story is telling us? I'm waiting for some responses. Milwaukee Atheists from Genesis 1. Critical Explorer here. Not part of this creation tale, says Carrie Ann. There was another one. I think Critical Explorer said nope. Inquisitive Bible Reader, it's good to see you here, Paul. No, the J source has Adam created to work God's garden. It's the P source where man is made in God's image. Yes, thank you. This is not native to the text. This is reading into the text. This is not reading the text carefully. This is making the assumption from the start that the text is univocal and that anything that is written in the Bible can be applied to any other text in the Bible, and that's wrong. Vishanti has an objection. He just said he thinks the serpent is saying "nah" to the touch part, then immediately quotes the text where this says they won't die if they eat. Thank you. Another excellent observation. My audience is pretty smart here. You guys know what's going on. I appreciate it. It's excellent to see you here, Simone. We're having fun. I'm happy you were able to join us. So, good job, guys. This is, I've mentioned this before. I'm going to repeat it. Apologetic tactics presume univocality. Numerous responses, there are numerous responses to why Genesis chapter 1 and Genesis 2 and 3 are widely understood as different, competing stories. I've already mentioned a couple. The presentation of God in both stories is dramatically different. The language that's used to tell the stories is dramatically different. The ways in which Genesis 1 is written seems to suggest that there's knowledge of the Genesis 2-3 story as an independent account that Genesis 1 is trying to correct or at least contextualize. Now, there's something else I want to key in on here. He said something about disobedience. Is this a feature of this story? I mean, I suppose one could say that, it's wrong to disobey God, but is this something that is presented just naturally as extremely problematic in the story? I think yes, but I think not in the way that the Christian Road Warrior has presented it. I think God has his own motives and his own reasons for the people not eating from the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, and we can talk about that in a little bit here. Maybe let's go back to the video and try and get through this. Try and get through as much of it as we can. I don't know if we're gonna be able to do it all. It could take a while. But let's see how far we go. All right. Okay. Let's continue.
Because now Adam is really culpable for being silent in this situation, but apparently was there all along, being silent. Then the eyes of both of them were opened. Okay, Satan told a little truth or some truth there, and they knew they were naked, and they sewed fig leaves together and made themselves coverings. Their eyes, apparently not their physical eyes, but their spiritual eyes, they knew that they were naked, and now they're covering themselves. So in the day that they ate, something did happen. Now, theologians and scholars call that spiritual death. Not anything new, and not some artificial contrivance that they made up out of thin air. We're looking at the text and seeing things happen. Now, all of a sudden, they want to cover themselves with their own righteousness, so to speak, which, according to other scriptures, says our own righteousness is filthy rags before him, right? And they heard the sound of the Lord.
Oh my God. Okay, I have to stop it here because there's so much happening here, right? And I'm gonna ask you guys these same questions, let me know. This idea that he's presented to us of spiritual death. So he says, in the day they ate, something did happen. Scholars and theologians call this spiritual death. Is that in the text? Is that anywhere in this story? Is there anywhere in this story that provides any indication that spiritual death is an issue in this story? That it's something that is a feature of this story? Is it there? Oxton says nope. He says not at all. Milwaukee atheist Lawrence says, I also understand this as spiritual death, but only after I added those words myself in a Word doc. Very good, buddy. Derek Lambert from Myth Vision, my good friend, says not at all. You're picking this up, guys. You're smart. It's not there. So where on earth does this idea come from? Why on earth do we assume or do we presume that this is about spiritual death? You know what's interesting is this is an idea that is not even easy to establish from a lot of the New Testament. I think it probably comes from I think it probably comes mostly from Romans chapter 8 verses 30 to 31. I'm just going to put this on the screen here, but importantly, this is this is kind of how we do biblical studies. This is how we do intertextuality when we're looking at texts that are similar and how we understand the relationship between them. I can't scroll it from this screen. I have to go over here. Oh, not that one. Over here. Okay. So let's scroll down here to verse 28. This is from the NRSV. We know, just make sure I've got the right. Oh, no, sorry. Romans 8, verses 10 to 11. Way too far. Let's start verse 9. But you are not in the flesh, you are in the Spirit. Since the Spirit of God dwells in you, anyone who does not have the Spirit of Christ does not belong to him. But if Christ is in you, the body is dead because of sin, the Spirit is life because of righteousness. If the Spirit of him who raised Jesus from the dead dwells in you, he who raised Christ from the dead will give life to your mortal bodies as though his Spirit dwells in you. So I think that's probably the clearest expression in the entire Bible of this idea of spiritual death. This idea that the mortal fleshly body is dying and it cannot be salvaged. Paul introduces this idea of quote unquote spiritual bodies. And we're not going to get into what on earth he means because it's super involved and complicated, but I think it's really, really important here to point out that one thing that Paul certainly doesn't do when he's talking about spiritual death is he's not drawing that idea back to eating from the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, at least not in this passage. Nitty has suggested Romans chapter 5, 12 and 15, more death in there. Should we, maybe we should look at that. Let's take a look and see what's in Romans chapter 5. I'm going to pull this up. I'm going to go to Romans 5. More than that, we even boast in God through the Lord Jesus Christ, through whom we now have received reconciliation. Therefore, just as sin came into the world through one man, and death through sin, so death spread to all because all have sinned. Sin was indeed in the world before the law, but sin is not reckoned where there is no law. Yet death exercised dominion from Adam to Moses, even over those whose sins were not like the transgression of Adam, who is a type of the one to come. So that's obviously much more clear. Thank you, Nitty, for pointing that one out to me. Importantly, This is not native to the story in Genesis chapter 2 to 3. This is something that Paul sees when he reads this story. But I am not, for this exercise, I'm not interested in what Paul has to say about the story. I'm interested in what the story has to say for itself. And I hope you are too. And that's what we want to look at. And this is why Josh and I gave the presentation that we did over at Derek's channel. I got a couple more super chats here that I need to get to. Thank you very much, Jesus Tales. For $5 says Richard Freeman rocks because he wrote out every single verse and its supposed origination as JERD, also P and whatnot. Makes an easy start. It certainly does. Friedman's The Bible with Sources Revealed is an excellent resource for this. Of course, not every scholar agrees with where the fine divisions between the sources are, but by and large, it's a pretty good presentation of how scholars who still hold to this particular idea, and there's other source theories out there, but this particular idea, it's a good presentation of how they work through it. Thank you very much for the super chat. Revelo 178, thank you very much for the generous 20 Canadian dollars. In the image of God means looking like the gods, right? Yes. The idea that Xenophonus turned in onto its head, man has made the gods in his image, looking human, but gods are still superhuman, namely immortal and more powerful. I'll just say this: when I wrote these chapters on the gods in my book, what I say is the gods are just like human beings, except they're bigger, stronger, smarter. They're more. Gods can live forever, but it does seem like there's some a latitude for killing gods under certain circumstances. We actually see maybe the possibility of something like that even in Psalm 82. I encourage you guys to check it out. It's pretty cool. But thank you very much, Reveal, for the super chat. Derek, it's so good that you're hanging out with me this evening. Happy to see you. I love you too, man. Thanks for coming out. And Michael Beverly, any evidence that Adam equals Jesus in some of Paul's theology, first man, last man, etc.? Paul constructs his theology on this idea that the sacrifice of Christ is needed because we're all seen in the headship of Adam. Adam was the representative of humanity when, in Paul's opinion, Adam infused all of his descendants with this stuff he calls sin, which is also not native to Genesis chapter 2 and 3, and that Christ is the solution for that. But honestly, Michael Beverly, that's a question you should be asking a New Testament scholar. I'm just bugging you, but thank you very much for the 50 Mexican pesos. All right, let's. I hope everyone's having a good time. I'm having fun. Maybe we should check some hockey scores, or should I not check hockey scores? Oh God, it looks like the Florida Panthers absolutely smoked the Boston Bruins, which I suppose is only fair because the Boston Bruins absolutely smoked the Florida Panthers in game 1. And the Oilers have a 1-0 lead on the Vancouver Canucks midway through the first period. I hope no one's PVRing the game. And if you are, then maybe let me know and I'll stop giving you updates. All right. Okay. Let's continue and see what happens in this video.
I don't know that.
Oh, shut up, Alexa. I gotta mute her every now and then. All right.
God walking in the garden in the cool of the day. And Adam and his wife hid themselves from the presence of the Lord God among the trees of the garden. Now, all of a sudden, after they disobey, they're sowing fig leaves. They can see they're naked. They have a problem with being naked, which they didn't before, according to the narrative. I believe it was the end of Genesis 2, where they were naked and weren't ashamed. Now they're hiding from the presence of the Lord. What is that? Why are they hiding? They weren't hiding before.
I feel like this is just such an easy question to answer. Why are the man and the woman hiding now that they ate from the tree, from the fruit of the tree of the knowledge of good and evil? What does the text say happened? Let's actually, at this point, let's take a look again at, oh, I didn't mean to do that. I meant to do that. Let's take a look again at the text in Sepharia, and let's see what's going on here, right? And I mean, it's so on the nose. You can figure this out. You don't need a theology degree to figure out why the man and the woman hide themselves. So, all right. So, the snake says, God knows that on the day you eat from it, your eyes will be opened and you will be like God, knowing good and bad. And the woman saw that the tree was good for food, for eating, and that it was pleasing or desirable to the eyes, and that the tree was a desirable source of wisdom. And she took from its fruit and she ate, and she gave also to her man with her, and he ate. Then the eyes of both of them were opened, and they saw, they knew that they were naked. And they sewed together fig leaves, and they made for themselves loincloths. Come on, people. Come on. Why? Whoops! I totally forgot to put the text on the screen. I'm really sorry about that. But I read it for you, so you heard it. But answer the question. All right, everyone, answer the question. Why are they suddenly now hiding from God? Why? What could it possibly be? Why did they feel the need to cover up? It says right in the text what's going on. It says it right there. They're naked. And now they recognize that fact for the first time. Sorry, I'm pulling this up from Vishanti. Knowledge of naked and shame. Yes. Thank you, Vishanti. So that's what's happening in this story. Let's get back to the video. Oh, not that way. I hope I'm getting better at this. I know this is something I consistently struggle with, but I hope I'm getting better. Okay. Look at this. We're almost halfway through this video, and I'm going for like an hour
Something
and a half.
happened that day, according to the text.
Yes.
See, again,
yes.
People need
what happened? They recognized for the first time that they were naked, and they were ashamed about it. It doesn't have to be any more complicated than that.
Attention and stop listening to people who won't quote you the text, won't show you the text, but want to talk about the text, but not give you the accurate information from the text. So we know that even though Adam and Eve did not physically die right then that day and drop dead, something happened. Once again, according to the text, they're sowing fig leaves.
Yes, what happened? I mean, denying the fact that they didn't die, or denying that they died, or recognizing that they didn't die, on the day they ate the fruit doesn't mean that we also recognize that nothing happened. Something clearly happened, something very significant. There is a metaphysical change that occurs in the human couple when they eat from the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, in that for the first time they recognize their own nakedness. This is tied to the idea of this is a a loss of innocence and naivety. And remember what I said earlier, that it's important to see these images and these ideas as they're connected to sex, the nakedness, the knowledge, the desire, the eating. This all has to do with human responses to sexuality. And I'll say this as well. This also has to do within this story with some sort of implied quality of what it means to be God. And I guess I'll ask at this point too. If the question is who's lying and who's telling the truth, when God says that you're not going, you will die on the day that you eat from the fruit of the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, and then the Nakash, or the serpent, comes along and says, your eyes will be opened and you will be like God, knowing good and evil, or good and bad, on the day that you eat from the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. If you had to choose one between these two statements, which one is the true statement based on what's happened, and which one is false? I mean, it's just as simple as that. When God says, on that day, you will die, and it doesn't happen, that's a false statement. When the Nachash says, on the day you eat of it, your eyes will be opened, and you will become like God's, knowing good and evil, and this happens, that is a true statement.
They know they're naked. They're hiding now from God when they never hid from him before. Again, scholars and theologians will call that indicators of spiritual death that took place.
But importantly, indicators of something that is not at all native to the text. If you're just reading this story, if you have nothing in front of you except for Genesis chapter 2 and 3 and 4, you don't know anything about spiritual death. Nothing at all. So why are we introducing this into the story when it's not there?
Right then, right there, and the physical death followed, as we know from the rest of Genesis. Then the Lord God called to Adam and said to him, where are you? Not that he didn't know. My understanding of this is that more than likely they would meet in a certain area, and they weren't there where they normally meet. That's why he's saying, where are you? Of course, the omniscient God knows where they are, but of course.
So in this story, is there any reason to think that God in this story is omniscient? Is there any reason to think that God in this story obviously knows where the human couple are? Is it there? Is it in the text? Is that something you can glean out of the text? Thank you, Elizabeth Moon. Thank you, Ronan of Stag. So who's reading into the text? Who is not taking the text seriously here? Because when I look at it, I'm doing my best to carefully weigh what's happening in the story, in the text itself. And when I read this text, I see no reason to expect that God knows what's happening with the human couple. I take him at his word. I take the narrator at his word that Yahweh does not know where the human couple are.
Or for our benefit, for those of us reading now, this is showing, once again, what's happening, a spiritual death, so that now Yahweh has to say, where are you? When he didn't have to say that before. Once again, paying attention to the text. So he said, I heard your voice in the garden, and I was afraid. Again, fear. Where did that come from? Didn't have it before, according to the text, because I was naked and I hid myself. Spiritual death, separation from God. And he said, who told you you were naked? Have you eaten from the tree of which I commanded you that you should not eat? And of course, Adam wants to pass the buck. And then the man said, the woman whom you gave to me to be with me, she gave to me of the tree and I ate. And I think this is so funny. How everyone's passing the buck. And the Lord God said to the woman, okay, what is this that you have done? This you have done. The woman said, the serpent deceived me and I ate. I just wanted you to focus in on this right here. Going back to verse 3. Eve said, you shall not eat, nor shall you touch, right? That's what she said that God said. And just for practical purposes, let's go right back to what God actually said in 2:17. And the Lord God commanded the man, saying, of every tree of the garden you may freely eat, but of the tree of the knowledge of good and evil you shall not eat. Nothing about touching, right? For in the day that you eat of it, you shall surely die. I shouldn't have to point out that in this text, God does not say you shall surely die only physically, right? Simple as that, right? He didn't say that. And
So, like, how silly is that? That because God didn't say you will only die spiritually, or this expectation that somehow, for some reason, what reason, I have no idea, God has to make this distinction. Because again, I'm going to keep repeating this, it's not native to the text. There's nothing here about spiritual death. There's not even anything in this particular story about spirits. One of the things that we discover within an ancient Hebrew and ancient Jewish worldview is that they were monists. They were not dualists in terms of their perspective of anthropology. There was no sense that human beings were spirit machines, that our bodies were vessels and containers of a life force or something like that. In the same sense that that the Greeks, the Greek philosophers, thought this through. Now, the Hebrews thought that there was life in the breath, certainly, and in the blood. They had this sort of perspective, but the human person, like the person, was a whole physical being. There's no spirit in Genesis chapter 2. The word itself does not appear anywhere in Genesis chapter 2 and Genesis chapter 3. It is not there.
and he neither said spiritually or physically. But again, according to the Bible, when we look at the whole of the Bible, we see what's happening. And I'm not going to show the rest of that clip because it's nothing relevant that I need to show you from those guys. Okay, in the rest of what they're saying, because basically they're trying to say God lied when he said, "You shall surely die in the day," and they didn't physically die that day. But again, God didn't say in the day you eat, you shall surely physically die. He didn't say that. He says you'll die. And again, according to the Bible, there's more than one type of death. Now I'm going to show you that from Scripture. What do we learn from this? We learn that according to
All right, so he's going to get into this in a little bit. First, there's a big section that I cut out from the video here, because I didn't see that it was particularly relevant. He brings up a whole bunch, well, not a whole bunch. How many does he pull up here? He looks at a handful of texts from the New Testament: Matthew chapter 4 verse 6, Luke chapter 4 verses 33 to 34, and Acts 16 to 17, in order to show that Satan does not lie all the time. This seems to be an important point for him, counterpoint to whatever we were arguing. He seems to think that I suggested that a Christian apologetic idea is that Satan can only lie, because he's presented as a liar. I'm happy to concede that Satan can tell the truth in any Christian worldview, and that this takes place, throughout the New Testament projections of who Satan is. Another thing that the Christian World Warrior is very careful to point out, something that he thinks is really important, is that one of the texts that he cites is the story of Satan tempting Jesus in Matthew chapter 4. And in this story, something that he does consistently is Satan quotes scripture to Jesus and says, based on these texts of scripture, you should be able to do this. You can have all the kingdoms of the world if you jump off of the temple onto the ground. You won't die. Angels will rescue you. And any cite scripture in support of this. The Christian Road Warrior thinks it's really important to point out that whenever Satan quotes scripture, he's telling half truths, but not the whole truth. So he will say that even when Satan tells the truth, it's in a deceptive fashion. So that in his mind, of course, the serpent in Genesis chapter 2 and 3 is Satan, which again is not native to the text and is an interpretive layer that's added on much later in time. But his thinking is that whenever Satan responds to Eve and the things that he tells her is partially true but not completely true, and I would humbly suggest that if he wants to make that case, then he needs to demonstrate it. I don't see it. I don't see it in the text itself.
The scripture, Satan is a deceiver. Demons, of course, are deceivers, but they can tell the truth, of course, with the goal of deception. And I think there's a saying that I don't remember it exactly, about how the best lie is always peppered with some truth, something to that effect. So yeah, Satan and demons can tell the truth. Okay. So again, sometimes getting a doctorate doesn't mean you pay attention to the details like you should. All right. And that goes for Mr. Lambert and all his atheistic crew and scholars that he brings on. All right. So did God...
Do you like how he does the air quotes on scholars there? That's fun, eh? Is Derek still here? Is Derek from Myth Vision still kicking around? I can check and see. Yeah, he's still around, still kicking around. So listen, guys, I'm gonna say something about my friend Derek Lambert, who does not have a university education, has no formal training in the Bible or in the ancient Near Eastern literature or the texts. He doesn't read the original languages. But my hat is off. I'm not actually going to take my hat off, but my hat is off to my friend Derek Lambert, because Derek, and he's been public about this, so I don't think he minds me saying it. Derek pulled himself out of a life of drug addiction. He has turned himself into a successful businessman, and he runs an amazing channel. He has managed, without any formal academic training, to consume enormous amounts of information, just because he loves this stuff about the ancient world, about ancient mythology, about early Christianity, and ancient Canaanite and ancient Near Eastern religions. And he has managed to form relationships with some of the most prominent scholars in my field. Derek deserves respect. Derek has my respect. He's my friend, but I also have huge respect for Derek, for Myth Vision Podcast, and for what they're doing. I don't agree with him every time. I don't agree with everything that with all the videos that he produces. I don't agree with his guests every time on his show. But you know what? The guy knows what he's doing to an impressive degree, given where he came from and given his training. So, listen, I just wanted to say that because maybe it doesn't get said enough. And while I have been blessed to have had the opportunity to have formal training on some pretty arcane stuff that most people don't get the opportunity to do, um, I think it's important that that we recognize where people were lay people were very bright and eager lay people make massive contributions to the field, and that's really what Derek's doing. Derek's not contributing his own scholarship, which is something else that the Christian Road Warrior is bringing up. But what he's doing is he's popularizing this stuff on a scale that the rest of us in scholarship have been unable to do. And that's amazing. That is truly amazing. So again, Derek, my friend, my hat's off to you. Yeah, I think it was important to say that. But let's continue here.
God lied? No, he just said, in the day you eat, you will surely die. And in that day, we see indicators of what can be called spiritual death. Okay.
No, we don't. We just don't.
Then they died physically years later. Yeah, I want to show you something that's a little more clear from Jesus himself, that there are two types of death. Luke 9:60. What's Jesus talking about? Okay, let's go back up here. Yeah, let's get a little more context. Luke 9:59. Then he said to another, follow me. But he said, Lord, let me first go and bury my father. Now, notice what Jesus says now. He's more clear. Jesus said to him, let the dead bury their own dead. What Jesus is not saying, which should be obvious, is that physically dead people are not burying physically dead people. That's not what Jesus is saying. Okay. Not. I'm sure you get that. Okay. When he said, let the dead bury their own dead, okay, you just got to think a little bit. When you're spiritually dead, you're physically alive, right? That means you can be spiritually dead to God, but you can walk around, you can talk, you can go to work, you can go to the park, you can do a whole lot of things, including burying people. You see? Jesus confirmed in plain enough language there are two kinds of death. Because how are physically dead people burying physically dead people? Nope, doesn't happen. Not happening. So he's talking about let the spiritually dead bury the physically dead. Case closed. Suitcase filled with clothes, linens, and
This part. He's pretty proud of himself for that one, guys. So, I mean, right at the outset, I'll say it again, as I have been saying through this entire stream. You can't presume univocality on the text. Just because Jesus said something in the New Testament You can't just automatically extract that meaning and apply it to the original context of what was written in Genesis chapter 2 and 3. But more to the point, I'm not even convinced that this idea of spiritual death is native to what Jesus is talking about. I mean, I think, and I've seen a couple of I've seen a couple of commentators uh show and suggest that's what Jesus is getting at. He's making this distinction between physical and spiritual death, but importantly, uh it's not clear in this text, and I'm not even sure. Maybe Nitty or someone else can help me out, as you did with the Paul and Roman stuff. Is there somewhere where Jesus provides a clear representation, even something similar to what Paul did with regards to physical and spiritual death, two kinds of death? Now, like, look at the text here. All right, look at. I'm gonna back it up to where it's zoomed in, and so you can see it a bit clearer. Look at this. All right, what is this about? Jesus said to them, so this is Luke 9, 59 to 60. Who can follow after Jesus? Somebody comes and says, well, I'll come and follow you, but first I need to go and bury my father who passed away. And Jesus responds to him with this: let the dead bury their own dead, but you go and preach the kingdom of God. Now, that same story is pulled out of or repeated in the book of Matthew. I think it's in chapter 8. And Luke adds this little bit to it in Luke 9:61 and 62. Another also said, Lord, I will follow you, but let me first go and bid them farewell who are at my house. But Jesus said to him, no one having put his hand to the plow and looking back is fit for the kingdom. So, is this clearly about spiritual death? I'm not even sure. Like, as I read this text in Luke chapter 9, it seems to me that Jesus is speaking hyperbolically, right? Like, these are hyperbolic statements just about how demanding, how extremely demanding it is to follow Jesus. So demanding that you know, you can't bury your own father, and you can't even say goodbye to your family. I think because it's left hanging on that point, let the dead bury their own dead could just be another way of saying, don't even worry about the dead at all, because that's just not important. I think it's possible that that the real message Jesus is communicating here has nothing to do with spiritual death. For all we know, this is just, part of the exaggeration of the absurdity that he's communicating, right? That it is extremely difficult and demanding to follow Jesus. I think that's the point. We're almost done this video, guys, and I feel pretty good about myself for that. 2 hours. I said I would go for 2 hours, but we're gonna finish this. If you have any more super chats, feel free to fire those off. I haven't seen the Christian Road Warrior around. I had extended an invitation for some others to join me, but nobody but you fine people want to hang out with me tonight. So it is what it is. But let's finish this this video. All right. There.
That's right. The warrior had to throw a little rhyme in there. All right, so let's do a little more. I'm gonna get you into give you some more information. I have one of the resources that I learned from one of my seminary classmates was Dr. Constable's notes. He does like a commentary on every book of the Bible. He updates it every year. I just want to introduce you to that. And what I love about his stuff is that it's, he has notes and everything. All right, this is it right here. Dr. Constable's expository Bible study notes. Okay, and I highly recommend it. Okay, he's got his doctorate, as you can see here, Dr. Constable. He's taught at Dallas Theological Seminary for 45 years. Okay, and he has these free notes on every book, as you can see here. On the whole, it seems probable that we should understand death to mean a spiritual state, but a state aptly symbolized by physical death. When man sinned, he passed into a new state, one dominated by and at the same time symbolized by death. It is likely that spiritual death and physical death are not being thought of as separate, so that the one involves the other. Okay. Now, that's just a part of what's being said, right? The Hebrew construction emphasizes the certainty of death. However, it is defined. Why did Adam and Eve not die immediately? All right. He says, because the phrase on the day, verse 17, in Hebrew is an idiom meaning for certain. And he gives these references. Not so sure about that, because when I look at the text, they do are killed that day. There's a guy that, especially in the First Kings passage, and he tells him that I told you if you did this, you were going to die the day. Now he does kill him that day, but not immediately, though. The point is, the Bible does teach that.
All right. So I'll just finish.
There's two kinds of death. Did God fail to carry out his promise? Certainly not. But the death that overtook the guilty pair that day was spiritual only. Physical death did not come until centuries later. Once again, confirmation of what the Bible actually says. And of course, you can see the notes here. He's quoting from Archer, as you can see there, the reference number 2. Yes. How?
All right. So, yeah. All right. So, sorry guys, I'm 51. Yeah, let's finish this part up. It's good coffee. But I'm getting low on ice, so it's not quite as cold as it used to be. All right. So, the first thing he does here in his conclusion is he pulls up a set of notes, free notes that are made available by a retired professor from Dallas Theological Seminary by the name of Thomas Constable. And, to point out that, yes, absolutely, what's happening in the text is spiritual death, not physical death, because, you have to salvage this idea that God is telling the truth here, even though what he said clearly didn't happen. So we've already dealt with the spiritual physical death dichotomy, which is completely absent from the text. I did note here, Nitty did point out that Matthew 10:28 is the best shot for a body-soul death dualism. Luke 9 again is about commitments, when Jesus is the boom shakalaka. You got it. It's exactly right. So now, part of the problem in this story is that God says this quite explicitly, right? On the day that you eat from the fruit of the tree of the knowledge of good and bad, you are definitely going to die. And one of the commenters that Constable brought up in his notes suggested that this was not an expression of immediacy, but was an expression of certainty, that it was something that was going to happen, but wouldn't necessarily happen on that day, and provided a series of texts as proof for that. So it provided three passages where supposedly this is what's pictured. So the first of these is Exodus chapter 10 verse 28. Let's take a look at that. I'm not going to put this up on the screen because it's too much work for me. I'm just going to read it on my on my accordance here. So Exodus 10:28. This so this is right after the 10th plague on the Egyptians that Yahweh is using as judgment in order to convince Pharaoh to release his people so they can go serve him in the wilderness, slave for him in the wilderness. So here is what it says that in verse 28, Pharaoh said to him, he's saying to Moses, "Begone from me, take care not to see me again. For on that day that you see my face, you will surely die." So now, if you're confused, I'm not surprised, because I'm kind of confused as to how this indicates certainty as opposed to immediacy. I think the message from Pharaoh that he's delivering to Moses here is abundantly clear that if Moses ever sees him again, he is going to kill him on that day. I don't know, maybe is it the fact that this didn't happen? Proof for this commenter that it doesn't always mean that? That's a very unsophisticated way to read the text, I would suggest. But let's look at another one here. He's also included 1 Kings chapter 2 verses 37 and 42. So this is the story of 1 Kings 2:37. This is the story of Solomon's ascension to the throne of all of the kingdom of Israel, the fabled United Kingdom. And this happens after he's managed to overcome the attempted, I don't know if you could call it a coup, but it's the attempted accession of his brother, his half brother Adonijah. He's overcome that. He banishes Adonijah. He basically tells him, "You have to go and live on the other side of the river. If you ever cross the river, I'm going to kill you." Here's what he says. So the king. Oh, sorry. No, that's it's not Adonijah. It's this other figure, Shimei, in chapter 2, who had wronged David. So the king summoned Shimei and said to him, "Build yourself a house in Jerusalem and stay there. Do not ever go out from there anywhere else. On the very day that you go and cross the Wadi Kidron, you can be sure that you will die. Your blood will be on your own head." That's fair. I'm reading from the JPS, by the way. "That's fair," said Shimei to the king. "Your servant will do just as my lord the king has spoken." And for a long time, Shimei remained in Jerusalem. But then 3 years later, 2 slaves of Shimei ran away to King Achish, son of Maacah, in Gath. Shimei was told, "Your slaves are in Gath." Shimei thereupon saddled his ass and went to Achish in Gath to claim his slaves, and Shimei returned from Gath with his slaves. Solomon was told that Shimei had gone from Jerusalem to Gath and back. And the king summoned Shimei and said to him, "Did I not adjure you by Yahweh and warn you on the very day that you leave and go anywhere else, you can be sure that you will die. On the very day you will definitely die," is what Solomon said. "Why did you not abide by the oath before Yahweh and the orders which I gave you?" The king said further to Shimei, "You know all the wrong which you remember very well that you did to my father David. Now Yahweh brings down on your wrongdoing on your head, but the king Solomon shall be blessed, and the throne of David shall be established before Yahweh forever. The king gave orders to Benaiah, son of Jehoiada, and he went out and struck Shimei down so that he died. I don't see the problem here. This seems to accord very clearly with the instruction as it appears in Genesis chapter 2 and 3. So in finishing up here, and then if you have, there's a few more super chats, and if you have any more, you can get those in and I will address those. But just in finishing up, I wanted to look at what's going on in this story. Why we still haven't really addressed the question of why God told the man that he would die upon eating the fruit of the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, when that was never going to happen. Why he lied essentially to the man. Why did he do that? Well, I think the text provides some good indications as to the reason. So let's look at how this story concludes in Genesis chapter 3. When Yahweh discovers that the eyes of the couple are open and they know good and evil, he knows this because they are aware of their own nakedness. He's very upset. He curses the snake. He curses the woman. He curses the man. The curse that he gives to the man is that I'm just going to scroll down. The curse that he bestows upon the man. He says, "Oh well, Great Lakes." Oh no, that's the woman. Sorry. He says that he doesn't curse the man. He actually curses the land as a result of the man's actions. He says, "Because you did as your wife said, as your woman said, and ate of the tree which I commanded you, you shall not eat of it. Cursed be the Adamah, the ground, because you, by hard labor, by the toil of your brow, you shall eat of it all the days of your life. Thorns and thistles shall sprout for you, but your food shall be the grasses of the field." So he curses everybody, and then we're told here, by the sweat of your brow you shall eat. You shall get bread to eat until you return to the ground, to the Adamah. From it you were taken, for afar, or dust you are, and elafar tashuv, to dust you shall return. So the man names his woman Chava because she is the mother of all living. Then we're told that Yahweh God took and made garments of skin for the Adam and his woman, and he clothed them so that they would no longer be embarrassed in the presence of one another. And this is a very interesting and important part of this story in Genesis chapter 3, verse 22. Take a look at what this said. Now, Yahweh God said, "Look, the man has become like one of us, knowing good and bad. Now, what if he should stretch his hand and take also from the tree of life, thereby and eat and live forever?" So Yahweh God sent out of the Garden of Eden the man and out of the Garden of Eden to till the land from which he was taken. Sorry, I'm getting tired here. He was driven out. He drove out the man, and the east of the Garden of Eden, he stationed, or he settled, the cherubim, the guardian angels, and the way of the tree of life was guarded by literally a whirling, flaming sword. So the message here is abundantly clear that the tree of life in the middle of the garden needs to be protected from the man, because in eating from the tree of life, he will live forever. Now, this presumes at the outset that the man and the woman, while living in the garden, have not eaten from the tree of life. I would suggest that there's concern now about the tree of life because their eyes have been opened, right? I think maybe it's possible there was no recognition of the tree being there or the effects of the tree itself for the couple. And this has caused some alarm and some consternation for God. He addresses the rest of the divine beings in his council there and says, what are we going to do now that the man's eyes are opened? And what does he say there? He has become like one of us, knowing good and bad. What if he should now take from the tree of life in the middle of the garden, eat from it, and live forever? So the man has become like God, but he's not God, a God, at least not yet. It seems clear from this story that divinity is a combination of these things. It's a combination of knowing good and bad. It's the sophistication of recognizing the need to cover up. It's immortality, living forever. So the man and the woman, having eaten from the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, have taken that first step towards divinity, but they're not all the way there because they have not taken the next step to eat from the tree of life in the middle of the garden. And that's why they are banished. It's because they don't belong anymore. It's because they're they're no longer oblates. They're not slaves that can continue to till and keep the garden of God in Eden. They're beyond that. But there's some urgency that they should not attain full divinity either, which is why they have to go. And I think the message of this story, one of the many messages, one of the very interesting parts of this story is this, that humankind is like God, but not God. It's very interesting that the next story, following on the heels of the conclusion of this one, is that the woman Chava gives birth to her firstborn son. She creates, literally, the word there, kana, that is used means to create. She creates a human being, like a god. So humans are like gods, according to Genesis 2 and 3, but they're not gods. So, yeah, I just got, I think, one little message here from Christian Warrior to finish. I as I said, I discovered this stream just right at the end, so I was feeling cheeky. I posted a little comment on there. He noticed, and he responded.
How dare you? That's right.
Yeah.
Yes. How dare you promote majority scholarship? What is that? Is that the consensus gentium fallacy, Kip? Doesn't work, bruh. Not falling for that. Majority can be wrong and often is wrong, just like I've demonstrated here. So, so you and Josh need to get off that consensus gentium fallacy. That's, come on. That's not going to work here. And it's not going to work with most people that understand basic logic. No. That's not how we determine truth. We determine truth by looking at the facts and the details and the evidence, as I've done in this video, showing that that day something did happen, which is why scholars and other theologians have said, hey, wait a minute. They're the fig leaves, they're sowing fig leaves and all this stuff. They're hiding and running from God. They're afraid.
It's because they realize it. No, okay. It's not in the text.
So they're not making this stuff up. No, it's in the text.
It's not in the text, guys. It's not in the text. It's just not in the text. I'll say one more thing here about the argument from consensus, which is something that I do quite a bit, that Dr. Josh does quite a bit. The Christian Road Warrior takes us to task for this, as if we're suggesting that because this is the majority scholar opinion, this means it's right. And that's not what we're doing. What we are suggesting when we invoke the consensus of scholarship in support of a view of a particular text, we're saying that this is something that you really need to take seriously. If you're going to counter the consensus view, then you better get your facts straight. If you're going to challenge the consensus view, you better first at least understand it, at least understand why so many scholars think the way that we do about the texts when we read them. And then if you have some objections to that, then bring it on. Sorry, Christian Road Warrior, you did not do that. You assumed univocality on the text when it was not there. You introduced elements into the story that are foreign to the story and actually detract from the true meaning, or I would say from the original meaning of this story when it was first told and when it was first written. And you appear to be ignorant of the ancient Near Eastern background of this text, which I didn't even take the time to get into. If that is something that you guys are interested in, then by all means, come and check this out. I'm gonna pull this up here. See how quickly I can do this. I'm not very good at this. Like I said, I feel like I'm getting better, but I'm gonna try and bring this up relatively quickly. Here we go. If you're interested in this stuff, in Genesis chapter 2 and 3, if you want to hear more about this, then come and join me and David McDonald on May the 27th. We will continue our deep dive into this really fascinating story. I encourage you to go and check out the first stream that we did a couple weeks ago about this story. One of the things that we're going to get into in this next one, which I did not take the time to get into, is the rich and really interesting ancient Near Eastern background of this story and why scholars think the way they do about it. Clearly, the Christian Road Warrior is not privy to this kind of information, and he really should educate himself about it before attempting to refute it. If this is something that you want to go even deeper on, I have a whole course. on MVP courses called Real Israelite Religions, Facts on the Ground and Propaganda in the Bible. The link is in the description of this video. I think it costs like $50. It's almost 14 hours of lectures. There's 18 lectures. And I go into all sorts of this stuff about how to understand the Bible against its ancient Near Eastern background, how to understand it relative to the material culture and the archaeology, what so many of these really interesting stories mean in their own right and separate from the veneer of Christianity that's been laid over top of them over so many centuries. So check it out. I think it's pretty good. Thanks for hanging out with me, you guys. I got a couple more super chats to get to. Jennifer, I feel bad. I told you to put something in the chat here. If you're still here, maybe throw something in the chat. You asked a question before. You asked where was it? I have to go back here. You asked this one. Isn't it good and fear? I don't know what that means. If you could maybe just throw that in there and remind me of what you're talking about, I would greatly appreciate it. If you're still here, I hope you're still here, and if you're not, I am very sorry that I neglected to get to it. I'll try to make it up to you in a future show. So Ronan of Stag, thanks again for the Canadian $5. One more Canadian $5 for the road this round, sir. Safe journeys and on your way out and back home with your fine lady this weekend. So she's waiting for me in the other room. She's eating my homemade spaghetti that I slaved over all day today. I'm gonna go and eat some homemade spaghetti when I get off here with you fine people. But thank you very much, Ronan of Stag, for your generosity. I greatly appreciate it. Hard work. Would you consider doing an in-person Diablo Critics seminar for us commoners? I would certainly consider it if I understood what that meant. Let me know what you have in mind, and maybe that's something we can talk about or think through. Are yeah, what does that mean? Like a private thing where you I don't know. Let me know what you have in mind by that, and that's something we can certainly think about. Hard work, but thank you very much for the super chat. Mr. Nice Guy, good to see you. Always wondered why the tree of life was not off limits until the forbidden fruit was eaten. Immortal and naive in the garden is okay. Immortal and wise not okay. No. As I pointed out, not immortal. So the whole idea of protecting the tree of life from the human couple is so that they don't achieve full divinity, so that they do not become gods. They have become like God, but they're not all the way there yet. But thanks very much for the super chat. I hope that that I've sufficiently answered your question there. Ronan of Stag lied. He's got one more. Will there be a list of consensus scholars provided, please? Listen up, guys. So my friend and colleague Dan McClellan is in the process. He's working on a project right now in an effort to establish some actual statistical boundaries on what we're talking about when we call consensus. So Dan McClellan has put together a questionnaire. It's over 100 questions. I've had a sneak peek at it. It's something that he's going to distribute to scholars, and he's asking for feedback and input from scholars to provide controls as to their confessional outlooks, as to where they are working, as to their training, their level of training, and all these sorts of things. And over time, he's going to put together something finally tangible that we can sort of hang our hat on with regards to what consensus means and how to understand that. So when scholars talk about consensus, it's something that we derive somewhat intuitively based on the amount of reading that we're doing on a particular topic and where the scholarship within the literature that reading seems to be going. So that's what we mean, but Dan's actually working at putting some and crunching some numbers to be able to attach to this. All right. So thanks very much for the super chat. I think that's it. Once again, I really appreciate everyone coming out and hanging out. Vishanti has brought up an important question, and I feel bad about this. Isn't new Diablo Critics this Sunday? Promote it. It was supposed to be this Sunday, but and I haven't said anything about this yet publicly, but Sunday is Mother's Day, and we have chatted among ourselves, the Diablo critics, and wondered about the possibility of postponing it for a week in honor of Mother's Day. But fortunately, I'm going to be out of town for that week, and Dr. Josh is also unable to participate the following weekend. So we've decided the best thing to do, and I'm very sorry for this, is we have canceled Diablo Critics for the month of May, and we will be coming back in June. I'm very sorry, Vishanti. It's like my favorite show to do right now, so it's sad. It sucks when we have to miss it. It's gonna be the first one that we'll have missed. I hope we don't miss too many more. But please be assured that I'm already starting to work on. We are already starting to work on what the June show looks like. It's gonna be great. But yes, thanks again, everyone, for coming out. It's probably super late for many of you. I'm starving, and I need to go eat. I didn't even finish all my coffee, but we're getting there. All right, kids. Be good. Again, thanks for coming out, and we'll see you again soon.